Dr. Tanudjojo is a former engineer with 36 years of business experience, holding president and CEO roles at several leading international companies across Greater China, Japan, Iran, the Middle East, and France, where he now lives. From 2018 until earlier this year, he was the global CEO of the Tanudjojo Foundation, based in Indonesia. He's currently an advisory board member of the Cambridge Partnership for Education in the UK and executive vice chairman for President's University Foundation in Indonesia. He's also helping to set up a foundation to address dyslexia in Asia. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. That's a very kind introduction.
Now, as you will have heard from that introduction, you were a successful business leader for much of your career. So what led you to go into philanthropy?
Thank you. It was in the last year of my business career that I wanted to follow Lindsay. I wanted to be an academic, actually. And I ended up in Singapore in one of the universities there. But the minute that I landed there, actually, somebody called me and told me that there is a foundation that is looking for somebody who is the CEO from the business side and who has the heart in philanthropy, which I didn't know very much about philanthropy at that time, even though I was also the board member of Utah Foundation, based in Hong Kong, actually, but operates in mainland China. I was in mainland China at that time, before I moved to Singapore. And then, to cut the story short, I talked to the provost and the president of the university. I said, I came to Singapore to do this, but then something came up. And they said, Satrijo, you go. Because here, you touch maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of lives, but over there, you will touch many more lives. And when you are there, you are more useful for the university. So that's how I ended up in the philanthropy. So I thank Tanudjojo family, who gave me the confidence to run the foundation. And actually, I learned more than probably that what I contributed for the last 6 years, that I learned about philanthropy and I learned about sustainable development goals.
Now, as we've heard, there's been this huge transfer of wealth in Asia in recent years, and it's a relatively new phenomenon. In your experience, how are families dealing with this transfer of wealth?
First is the numbers. From 2023 to 2030, a prominent consulting firm, strategy consulting firm, has estimated that there is a $5.8 trillion US dollars of transfer from the ultra high net worth and high net worth individuals in Asia Pacific. So that's a lot, right? And also that most of the billionaires in Asia, actually, they are first generations. So you are right that actually this is a new phenomenon in Asia. So we'll see how it goes. So you know that culturally in Asia, you know, if you ask for affluent families, they always, the first major investment is in the education of the children. Because with education is a means to not only to protect, but also to grow the wealth.
So be it funding a school, for instance, in where you came from.
Also for your own children, right?
Right.
So all of these young people who just came back from, and very often they also go overseas or they go to special training. And when they come back to the business, and then here it is. The business becomes more educated in a way. And the parents who are normally, or most of them, they don't have the luxury to go to the higher education, then they are kind of also force themselves to learn, and then they are self-educated.
So there's a big difference between the first generation and the second generation in the sense that the second generation are much more likely to have gone and studied in the US or Europe.
That's correct. But then also the first generation also educated themselves, so self-educated, right? And therefore, the transition or the transfer of the wealth actually becomes now, in a way, is more academic, if you wish, right? And this is why, because of the education of the younger generation. So I met the ultra-high net worth individual in Singapore last year, whose business is in hospitality and also in property. And he said this, you know, that any failure in the transmission of wealth actually is the fault of the parents, not the children. And he said that, therefore, he engaged actually a professional to really set up a family council, to really set up the governance, and to include the children in the conversation. I think Hashani also talked about to include, you mentioned that, right? That we need to include the youth also in the conversation, which is a departure from the culture in Asia. I think people in the room will understand what I mean. It's a complete departure from the culture in Asia. But this is what he suggests to do. And knowing some of them in Indonesia and in Singapore, I think this is what's going on. And also the family that I work for, it is what is going on. Is
that the
really,
older generation is starting to listen a little bit more to the younger generation.
And they set up an institutionalized process. And this is something that is new. Okay, but this is very important, very important. And one more note is that, that it is very important for them to pass on the culture or the value of generosity. So therefore, with the increased wealth, then there's also an increased philanthropic act, which of course, nota bene, is also for their own legacy. But this is how the transfer of the wealth and also the transfer of the value of generosity is going on today.
I mean, this is a very broad question, but in your experience, what motivates, what drives most high net worth individuals in Asia to give their money away?
I mentioned that there is a huge increase in wealth generation in Asia. If I understand correctly, there is going to be an increase of 27% more billionaire in the next few years in Asia, and that's a lot. But remember, in Asia, there's also about 2.1 billion people have very difficulties in having water that is safe to drink. There's about 37 million people who is undernourished, right? And there's always 23 million, who basically only 233 million, who really only have $1.9 per day. So that is the problem. So in one hand, there's an increase in wealth. On the other hand, there's a problem that is existing here. So therefore, there's a genuine interest of those who have the wealth to really do something. And like what I said, the value of generosity is very important for those families. So this is one of the key things, that's one of the driver, if you wish. And I would say that also the bonding of the family is very important. So if you ask the ultra high net worth, why are you doing this? And they say, okay, I want to really help those people. But at the same time, I also want to unite my family.
So actually having a family foundation is quite a bonding experience within a family.
Yes. And I think...
even if they disagree.
We can agree to disagree, right? So
yeah.
At least that's what it is. And like what I said, at least something at the table, which is, again, is a departure from the normal culture in Asia. And my friend Ruth Shapiro is here, and I think he will agree with me that that people also, if they do things in the philanthropic act and it is doing good for their business, why not? Right? I think that's also, but that is not the number one priority. Actually, that comes with it.
Yes, because I was going to ask, how does the emphasis on doing good influence philanthropists as compared to, say, the advantages of improving their business image? What's more important, or do they go together?
They go together.
They go together.
Okay,
right.
They go together. So
yeah.
meaning that I repeat what I said is that first is those people they really want to do good. Okay, and secondly is to also bond the family, and thirdly is why not if it is doing good for the business. Now, I have an anecdote. If you allow me, I will tell this story. Is that, once I was in a panel discussion in the university in Indonesia, where I am the alma mater, actually. So I'm the alumni. So what happened was that at the end of the discussion, just at the last minute, actually the member of the panelists raised a hand. I have to ask this question to Satrijo because otherwise I will not sleep tonight. And he asked me, what you do in the foundation that you're leading, how much it benefit to the business of the family? So I think I kind of knew where the question is leading to. So I did not answer the question directly, but I answered the question through other questions. So I asked him, it's a him. So if I do good, and then it's good for the beneficiary, do you have any problem with that? There's no problem, right? Because it's doing good and it's good for the beneficiary. That if I do good for the beneficiary and then I have good name, do you have any problem that I have good name? No problem, right? And if I have good name and then people like what I do and people like me and then it does good for my business, do you have any problem with that? There's no problem with that. So what's the question? I say, so where is the question? What is the essence of the question? So that actually answers the questions. Now, because remember this, it comes back to what I always believe that Mother Teresa always said, when you do good, you will be criticized, you will be mocked, you will be forgotten, etc., etc. But do good anyway. That's what she said, right? So I remember that.
Now, during the last Talking Philanthropy conference that I chaired, I spoke to Belinda Tanoto about her family giving $1 billion to the Tanoto Foundation, which, as I mentioned, you ran until recently. Tell us about the journey of the Tanoto family. I mean, what drove their giving? And also, how has the foundation changed over the years? Because obviously it's got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's become more institutionalized. I mean, talk us through that journey.
Okay, maybe I should correct a little bit. Belinda Tanoto, I remember you talked to her, and then she didn't say that the family gave $1 billion to the foundation. The family has an endowed concept for the $1 billion, okay? And then the foundation can use the result of that $1 billion, okay? So that was the decision made in 2017. And then basically, at that time, they were giving a few $1 million already, and they want to multiply it by almost 10 times, okay? And how do you do it? And this is where actually, with Generation 1 and Generation 2 work together, and then they say that we love education and public health. So that's where we focus. And then we are helped by a couple of strategic consulting firms that we focus on education. Let me talk about Indonesia first. Actually, the book is about Indonesia, right? So let me talk about Indonesia.
This book that you're referring to, Reimagining Philanthropy in the Global South, which I believe you've contributed to.
That's right, I contributed to this book because Tanoto Foundation actually became a case study for Cambridge Judge Business School. And then the chapter is also written based on that. Now, so what is the problem of education in Indonesia? The problem is that there are 4 things. One is that the early childhood education is very minimum or almost non-existent. Secondly is that the teachers and the principals, the teachers actually, they need to be more trained, better trained. And thirdly is the principals, also the same, need to be. And thirdly is the vocational. So we say, okay, we do the 3 things. And the vocational is the job of the CSR. It's very important to note that actually we separate between CSR and the foundation. So the foundation addresses the education, which is the early childhood, the basic teachers training, and also the principal training. And this is how the work is. And we started by saying this, the principle. 1 is impact. In business, I think a lot of businessmen here, and they say, we always care about profit and ROCE. In philanthropy, I always say that the language is impact. So actually, it's impact first. Second is, how can you say that you make impact? Well, provide the evidence. So it's evidence-based. And thirdly, is we always say that we cannot do everything ourselves. We only lie to ourselves. We say that I can do everything ourselves. So thirdly is partnership. So that's how things are evolving. And then we institutionalize it, and we create an advisory board, and then we really put the governance very strongly.
So you've mentioned two things there, partnership and governance. I'm going to come to governance in a second, but let's talk about partnership, because you've written about how in Asia, philanthropy very often increases partnership with government. Give us an example about how that works. What can philanthropists do that governments can't? What can they bring to the table to, say, deal with an issue like lack of early years education in Indonesia, for instance?
Well, first of all, is that philanthropy, I don't think we should replace the government, right? Philanthropy cannot replace the government. Philanthropy actually is complementing or together with the government going forward. Mm. I mentioned that we talked about early childhood before, and we said that Indonesia, prior to 2018, suffered around 38% of stunting.
Stunting?
Yeah. So the children under 5 or at 5 years old suffered what we call stunting, or they are stunted. Because
they were malnourished.
That's right. Actually, the main cause is actually an acute micronutrition, lack of micronutrition. But
and this has both physical and mental implications.
Yeah, physically they become shorter, etc. But more than that, actually, is the brain. Right. The brain actually is not developed, and after 5 years old, it's permanent. When you talk about education, these stunted children, when we say 38% of them, it's 4 out of 10, then how are you going to do this? You know, I like to say that it's like diamond. You know? Everybody knows diamond. When the diamond quality is bad, it doesn't matter what you do with it, it's still very bad, right? So that's what it is. And when the brain is damaged, then it cannot be developed. So we also address that, okay? And the government at that time was also addressing this. So then we go hand in hand together. And not only that, you know, we also embraced the multilateral organization, like the World Bank and UNICEF. So we all work together. And when we talk about partnership with the government, first is we don't replace the government, but we complement what the government does. And very often, the government also cannot, how do you say that, cannot really use the money, the budget, because they have not achieved something, or they do not know how to do things. And this is where we can complement.
So, yes, well, so what can philanthropic capital do in that particular instance that government investment can't do? What are the advantages? It's more nimble, it's more creative?
Well, we can take risk. We can take more risk, and you know, we don't have the bureaucracy like what the government does, right? So those are the areas where we can work directly in the field.
And then the government helps scale up.
That's correct. And then with that, then the government funding, because something has been proven, the government funding can come, and then it becomes bigger. And that's when
so philanthropy removes some of the risk, the political risk for governments.
You got it right. Exactly that. Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the rise of collaborative philanthropy in Asia, and why it's so important? And I'm talking here about collaboration between philanthropists.
Actually, collaboration is also development of partnership. Let me give you an example. Is when we talk about stunting again, as one example, is USAID. This is public knowledge. Yeah. It's not
not telling us any secrets.
Nothing secret. It's public knowledge. It's all in the news. Is that USAID had $4 million for Indonesia stunting, but with the one condition is that it has to be matched by the private, not the government, but by the private philanthropies in Indonesia.
So USAID would have, in that instance, they were saying we prefer to work with philanthropists rather than the government.
It's not prefer, it must.
It must, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
So, therefore, they contacted us because we are already partnered with the World Bank. So they contacted us, and they said they have 4 million. Then the foundation actually provided a part of it, but then I said, if we only get the part of it and they only give the part of it, then it's a pity, right? So then I tried to get the maximum of it. So then I called a few of the other organizations. So this is what I call an ad hoc collaborative, right? But it's a kind of development of partnership. It's an ad hoc collaborative, meaning that everybody now get together, so we chip in here, we chip in here, and then we end up with 4.5 million. So with 4.5 million, then the 4 million comes in.
So there was matched funding from...
Matched funding, 8.5 million. But that doesn't stop there. That's the key. It doesn't stop there. Then, actually, the government funding really can pour in. And that's what makes the difference. That's where you have to have partnership with the government.
So again, you have this sort of catalyst effect of the philanthropic money bringing in overseas development money and then Indonesian government money as the
philanthropic money, actually, in a way, is always catalytic.
Yeah.
Right? Because in Asia, in Indonesia, I can talk about Indonesia, Singapore, China, and also we were operating in Brazil, we are operating in Brazil, is that we always inkling with the government. Always. We never do against what the government does, right?
And that's one of the differences in Asia, isn't it? Where they say in the US there's a lot more suspicion amongst US philanthropists of working with government, say, for instance.
Well, we have to understand that what I said before is that most of the philanthropists, they are still the first generation and they are still business people. So they also want to do business. Yeah. Right? So they cannot say that my philanthropic world will damage my business. It has to also be complementary. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Will you do that? I think it makes a lot of sense, right?
That's absolutely all fascinating stuff. In the last remaining 10 minutes that we've got, I'm going to open it up to the audience. Have we got any questions on this? Because I have a couple more questions. There's one at the back.
You've had a lot of experience across corporates and charities and working in the sector. My question to you was, has ESG focus actually encouraged corporates to... ESG, the governance and equity. Has it encouraged the corporates to look at giving more seriously, or has it put more pressure?
Okay, you know, the foundation that I work for, which is Tanudjojo Foundation, has involved in the SDG since 2016. Sorry, you remember that it was launched in 2015. So since 2016, we already got involved, and since 2018, actually, all our programs are SDG aligned.
Were you asking about ESG? Yes, not sustainable development, environmental, social, and governance.
Yeah,
so,
it's the environment, social, and the governance, right?
Yeah, has that had an impact?
But ESG actually is also linked
to the SDGs.
So that's what I want to say.
Too many acronyms in this.
The SDG actually gave birth to the concept of ESG.
Yeah, true.
And of course, the ESG is a simplified concept, if you wish, right? To address for the business concerned. And yes, the answer is yes, definitely. It has really done that. But talking about collaborative, I hope I answered that question. But talking about collaborative, what is important in the collaborative is really that we have alignment, we have the same vision, and we have the same alignment of what we do. And you know, in Asia, the philanthropic world is still developing. So we address normally what we like to address, what the philanthropist likes to address. Probably we need to shift a little bit more to what the need, the demand, right? And this is why the collaborative philanthropy will be much help. It is new. It's actually the so-called PAA, Philanthropy Asia Alliance, was born 2 years ago. And take an example. If there is a problem of the mortality of the mother during birth, Indonesia actually today stands for 173 per 100,000 births. And the SDG calls for 70 average worldwide in 2030, and no countries above 140. So that means that we need a lot of work there still in, in this area. So then, why don't we collaborate and address this together? And that's one of the beauty of the collaborative philanthropy. And this is something new, and I think it will continue to evolve.
So what is this mechanism through which what is this organization through which philanthropists
there are many ways of doing the collaborative, right? And well, the big thing at the end, of course, is when you chip in everything, and then there is a big organization like Blue Ocean, like Co-Impact, etc., right? But the small collaboration, like what I just mentioned to you, that is an ad hoc collaboration, it also matters, right? So there are many spectrum ways of collaboration. And I think this is still evolving in Asia, and it will continue to evolve. And PAA actually is, the objective is to aim at the end, which is actually everybody.
What is PAA?
Philanthropy Asia Alliance.
Philanthropy Asia Alliance, and this is a network through which philanthropists can collaborate.
That's correct, yes.
On issues like maternal health and so on.
Probably is one of the issues, yes.
And this is clearly one of the ways forward for scaling up projects like this. Yeah. Thank you so much, Satrijo, for that fascinating discussion and for sharing your insights. And if people would like to know more, do have a look at this book, Reimagining Philanthropy in the Global South, in which Satrijo has written a chapter.
I wrote a chapter.
Yep.
I wrote a chapter about the experience of what we do in Indonesia in particular. Yeah.
Have we got one question at the back? Sorry. And
Sorry, if I may, Dr.
Absolutely.
Satrijo, I think you're very interesting with your comments. I just want to push back a bit about the role of the Family Foundation versus, you mentioned the CSR, which is to help corporate social responsibility. I think it explains itself. But the role of Family Foundation, I think it's important not to leave people to think about this idea of it's collaboration. I think in some sectors, people would think of it as you're working, with the government, which is, yes, that's what you want to, but I think it's important to define that even more further, which is that you also have to challenge the government. It's not just collaboration, right? It's challenge. That this is where we can make progress. Is if you're just collaborating, you're doing what the government wants to do, that's actually not going to get us where we need to be. But you actually need to challenge them to do better. And that's the role of the Family Foundation.
I am in full agreement with you. Collaboration does not mean that you follow everything with the government, but you collaborate in the ideas also. So collaboration is not only just funding, but also ideas. Just one example is that when we have this collaboration about stunting program in Indonesia, and then in one of the meetings, one of the government officers stood up and said, this is the first time that all of the different organizations of the government get together. It's because there is a catalytic power or catalytic essentia that make us get together. And that is the discussion that we have. So that's what I mean by collaboration.
I suppose it's providing beacons of good practice that government can then follow.
Because it's also breaking the silos, right? That's what is important. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.